I'm James Carter. The air in the sterile corridor seemed to crackle, not just with the hum of hidden machinery, but with a sudden, sharp charge of pure, animalistic fear. We had been seen. Deep within the belly of the beast, we had stumbled upon its most guarded secret, and the beast had just looked back. There was no turning away now, no blending back into the weary, resigned herd in the communal room. Discovery in this place felt less like being caught and more like being designated, assigned a new, likely terrifying purpose. My side screamed a sharp protest, a physical reminder of the world we'd fought so hard to escape, a world that suddenly felt almost welcoming compared to the gleaming, sterile danger we now faced. But the pain was a distant echo compared to the immediate, visceral need that seized me. Escape. The word resonated in my bones, a primal urge that overrode logic, overriding even the journalistic drive that had led me to this precipice. Freedom. It wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a raw, burning necessity. In that frozen second, facing the scientist who held the secrets of Project Chimera, facing the terrifying certainty that they knew, I understood something fundamental about the human spirit. All the allegories, all the histories of oppressive regimes and surveillance states, they boiled down to this singular, unyielding drive, the desire to break free, to shatter the cage, no matter how formidable the bars, no matter how sharp the cost of failure. It was the fire that sparked prison breaks, fueled revolutions, pushed people to defy impossible odds for the merest taste of autonomy. We were trapped, cataloged, specimens in a horrifying experiment. But the spark of defiance, however small, however reckless, was still alive, and it was screaming at us to run. We didn't hesitate for long. Even with a low, urgent growl, tugged us back, melting into the deeper shadows of the service corridor. Sasha, graceful even with her injured leg, moved with silent urgency. Artem, startled awake by the sudden tension, his eyes wide with fear and confusion, scrambled to stay with us. My own movements were clumsy by comparison, a painful shuffle against the quiet efficiency of theirs. My heart hammering against my ribs in a frantic, uneven rhythm that felt loud enough to betray us. Back inside the communal room, slipping through the barely open door, even somehow managed to secure behind us with another soft click. The air felt marginally safer, but the illusion was thin. The harsh fluorescent lights, always on, seemed brighter now, more accusatory. The sleeping figures on the cots were oblivious, lost in whatever temporary oblivion sleep offered. Alexei and Igor were awake, their eyes wide and questioning in the dim light, silent witnesses to our frantic re-entry. Alarms in Section Gamma, Ivan whispered, his voice tight, barely audible over the low hum of the facility. That's where we were. My blood ran cold. Section Gamma, the service corridors. They knew we'd been there. They knew we'd seen something. Time for subtle observation was over. We have to go. Now. Sasha's voice was equally low, but laced with a fierce urgency. Her eyes, even in the poor light, were burning with determination. Go where? James whispered back, the question hanging heavy in the sterile air. The door was locked. Guards were outside. The service door, Ivan replied, his gaze already sweeping the room, assessing, planning. It's a risk, but they won't expect us to go back that way immediately. They'll lock down the obvious exits first. The planning was a frantic, hushed exchange, a desperate weaving together of the scraps of knowledge we'd gathered, Ivan's meticulous observation of guard routines, shift changes, blind spots, Sasha's uncanny ability to find or improvise solutions. She'd already palmed a small, sharp piece of metal earlier, just in case, and had somehow acquired a small, easily concealed pistol. Artem's agility, his smaller size, his ability to move quietly, these were assets they hadn't fully appreciated until now. My own role felt less defined in this physical struggle. My strength in documentation, observation. But I had seen Project Chimera. I carried the proof. I had to get out. Internal tensions surfaced immediately. "We can't leave them," James gestured towards the sleeping survivors, then to Alexei and Igor, who watched with wide, fearful eyes. Should they try to wake them? Bring them? Too many. Ivan's response was blunt, unforgivingly practical. Too slow. Too much risk of panic. We wake them. The noise brings the guards down on all of us. We go, and maybe we create a distraction. A crack they can use later. Sasha nodded, her expression grim. The grim reality of their situation demanded brutal choices. It tested the trust we had built, the fragile bonds forged in the wild. To leave others behind felt like a betrayal, a horrifying echo of the choices we'd been forced to make before. But Ivan was right. A large group, some injured and many terrified, attempting to breach a high-security military facility. It was a death sentence for everyone. Alexei, Igor. James moved quietly towards their cots. Their eyes snapped to him, fear and a flicker of desperate hope in them. "We're trying to get out." Through the service corridor Ivan found. "It's dangerous. We can't take everyone. Stay quiet. If you hear chaos, try the main door. Maybe we buy you a chance." Their nods were small, tense, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible gamble. James's injured side was a throbbing impediment. Every movement was a carefully managed wince. Sasha's leg, while better, still limited her speed and agility. Artem, though agile, was still young, his fear palpable. The escape would be a test of their combined strengths and weaknesses. The opportune moment came during a scheduled, albeit brief maintenance check near their section. A small team of technicians, escorted by fewer guards than usual, moved down the corridor. Ivan had noted this pattern. It created a few minutes of reduced surveillance near the service door. As the technicians finished and the guards began to escort them away, Ivan moved. Silent as a ghost, he was at the communal room door, working on the lock with surgical precision, using Sasha's piece of metal and something he'd fashioned earlier. The low clicks were almost inaudible. Sasha was right beside him, her eyes fixed on the corridor. James was behind them, journal pressed tight against his aching side, the weight both a burden and a motivation. Artem, small and quick, huddled near the door, ready to slip through. The door clicked open. Ivan peered out. The corridor was clear for a few precious seconds. He slipped through. Artem followed immediately, a small shadow melting into the sterile light. Sasha followed, moving faster than James expected, adrenaline overriding pain. James followed, wincing, the sterile air outside the room, feeling both sharp and strangely liberating. They moved silently down the corridor towards the service door. Guards were still visible at the far end, but their backs were turned. The calculated risk held for now. Reaching the service door, Ivan immediately set to work on its electronic lock. This one was more complex, requiring delicate manipulation. Sasha stood watch, her body coiled, ready to react. James, pressing a hand to his throbbing side, scanned the empty section of the corridor behind them. Artem stayed close to Ivan, his young face a mask of tense concentration. Every second felt like an eternity. Another series of soft clicks. A faint electronic hum. The service door hissed open a crack, revealing the darker, industrial space beyond. Oil and metal smells hit them. The sounds of distant, heavy machinery were louder here. They slipped through, closing the door silently. They were in a narrow service tunnel, pipes running along the walls, shadows clinging to the corners. This was the underbelly of the machine. They moved with heightened caution, guided by Ivan's intuition and the faint sounds of the facility's inner workings. Artem, quiet and agile, moved ahead slightly, scouting around corners, his small size an advantage. They passed more secured doors, more warning signs in Russian. Then, the reinforced window into the laboratory. Brighter light spilled from within, figures in lab coats moving, equipment humming, and the platform, the shape under the sheet. My breath hitched again. The image from the tablet burned into my mind. Project Chimera. It was real. Deeper into the tunnels. Colder air. Stronger smells. Another window. This one darker, illuminated by that eerie red light. And the figures within. Shuffling. Groaning. Infected. Kept here. Cultivated. The chilling thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through James. We moved past another heavy door. This one with an even more complex electronic lock. Multiple high-level warning signs. Ivan paused, examining it, his interest intense. Whatever was behind that door was clearly highly restricted. It seemed beyond bypass, at least for now. As they navigated a junction, the air ahead seemed to shimmer with a subtle, unsettling light. They rounded the corner and stopped dead. Standing at the end of the corridor, illuminated by the glow of an embedded computer screen, was a figure in a lab coat, holding a clipboard, facing away. It was the scientist, the same one from the screening, the one who had seen them. They froze in the shadows, muscles screaming, with the need to bolt, hoping they were unseen. Artem, pressed against Ivan's leg, trembled slightly. James's side flared, but his focus was absolute, fixed on the figure. The scientist turned slightly, his face illuminated. He was looking at the screen. Complex diagrams, biological structures, data, labels, and the name that confirmed everything, the chilling truth that underpinned this entire horrifying facility. Project Chimera, proof, solid, unassailable. They weren't just containing, they were creating. The scientist made a note on his clipboard. Then he turned fully and started walking towards them, caught, deep within the machine, at the very source of its horrifying purpose. Alarms didn't immediately blare, but the silence stretched, tense and suffocating, filled only by the low hum of the facility and the sound of the scientist's approaching footsteps. This is James Carter. This is my journal. I have seen proof. Proof of Project Chimera. Proof of the military's terrifying involvement in creating the monsters. We are trapped inside their research facility, where survivors are specimens and horrors are engineered. And we have just been discovered by one of its architects. The scientist quickened his pace. He reached for something at his belt. A sidearm? A communication device? Ivan tensed, ready to move. Sasha shifted, her eyes darting for any advantage, any possible escape route. Artem pressed himself further into the shadows. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing siren shrieked through the tunnels, deafening after the tense silence. Not a general alarm, but a specific, localized alert. Red emergency lights flashed on, bathing the sterile corridor in a pulsing, disorienting glow. The scientist stopped dead, momentarily startled. He looked towards the direction of the siren, away from them. Now, Ivan roared, his voice cutting through the siren. They broke cover, sprinting down the corridor towards the scientist. He reacted instantly, raising a hand, shouting something amplified that was lost in the wail of the siren. He wasn't reaching for a weapon, but activating something. A sonic deterrent? A containment field. Ivan was on him in a second, a blur of controlled force. Not a fight, more of a brutal, efficient takedown. He disarmed the scientist, tossed him against the concrete wall. Sasha, moving faster than her injury should allow, grabbed the scientist's clipboard and tablet. Artem, quick and low to the ground, darted ahead towards the end of the corridor, looking for an exit. James, wincing with every step, followed close behind, looking for an exit, any exit, before more personnel arrived. The localized siren continued to scream. It was a distraction. But whose? Ivan's? Or something else? They didn't stop to question it. Ivan pointed towards a heavy door near where the scientist had been standing. An emergency exit? A service tunnel? It had no visible lock, just a heavy bar. Artem was already there, pulling at the bar with surprising strength. Figures in military uniforms, faces obscured, were already appearing at the far end of the corridor, weapons raised, moving with trained efficiency. The element of surprise was gone. Go! Ivan shoved Artem towards the door. Artem hit the bar with his shoulder, the door swinging open with a heavy clang. Dark, cold air rushed in. Artem scrambled through. Sasha followed immediately, clutching the tablet. Ivan followed, turning back for a split second, his eyes meeting James's. A silent exchange. James hesitated. His side, the journal, the proof. He had it. But running felt impossible. The guards were closing in. Then, a flash of movement from the shadows near the computer screen where the scientist had been standing. A figure detaching itself from the wall. Not a guard. Not the scientist. Yuri. He was standing there, watching them, his expression unreadable in the pulsing red light. He didn't move to stop the approaching guards. He didn't move to help James. Instead, he reached out and touched the embedded computer screen. A panel slid open, revealing a control interface. He manipulated the controls with rapid, practiced movements. Down the corridor, the advancing guards hesitated. Their weapons wavered. They looked confused. Then, lights flickered violently throughout the corridor. The screaming siren cut out abruptly, replaced by a deeper, more unsettling rumble from within the walls of the facility. Yuri glanced back at James, a brief, ambiguous look, then slipped back into the shadows, vanishing as silently as he had appeared. James didn't wait to understand. Yuri's action, whatever it was, had bought them seconds. He lunged for the open service door, his side exploding with pain. He threw himself through the opening, the heavy door slamming shut behind him with a final echoing crash. He landed hard on cold, damp earth. The air was biting, smelling of pine and damp soil. A brutal shock after the sterile facility air. Artem, Sasha, and Ivan were already moving, pulling him up. Behind them, the heavy door was sealed, but the sound of the internal rumbling grew louder, accompanied now by the blare of general alarms echoing from within the concrete structure behind them. They were outside, but freedom was a fragile concept here. Searchlights swept across the landscape above the tree line. The distant roar of engines grew rapidly louder. Pursuit vehicles. They were already coming. As they scrambled away from the facility perimeter, putting distance between themselves and the wailing alarms, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Below, in the pre-dawn gloom, they saw it, a military convoy, heavy vehicles, tents, personnel moving with purpose, and large metal containers being unloaded. And beyond them, figures shuffling, contained within a temporary fence, infected, but watched by soldiers. They were not free. They had only escaped the immediate confines of the cage. Now, they were running into the dark wilderness, alarms screaming behind them, hunted by a machine that had just revealed its terrifying secret, and facing the chilling reality of its horrifying cargo being moved in the wild. The shadows of the state had closed in, but for a fleeting moment, they had found a crack in the system. Whether it was enough to escape the coming dawn, or the terrifying things being transported in the valley, James couldn't know. The forest loomed, dark and unforgiving, and the sounds of pursuit were closing in fast. This is James Carter. This is my journal. We've escaped the lab, but the hunt has just begun, and the monsters are already out here.